All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the Community IT Innovators presentation on thoughtful tech tool selection for nonprofit impact. Today we're going to hear a case study from the Healthy Communities Foundation on how they approach their workflow around reporting and evaluating grantees from an equity perspective, and redesign their process, which included selecting and repurposing some common tech tools, including Asana, as a workflow manager. So I'm really excited to hear about this work because I think we can all benefit from hearing more about specifics about how an organization analyzes their business needs and fits those tech tools to their needs. And I'm especially interested in the way they try to intentionally improve equity, which is a work in progress for so many of us at our organizations. So my name is Carolyn Woodard. I'm the Outreach Director for Community IT and the moderator today. Our learning objectives for today are to learn a practical application of a trust-based approach to reporting, connecting your organizational values to how you use tools in practice, how to get the tools working for you versus you working for the tools. So I think we're going to talk more about how you take those big picture values and make it useful in your 9-to-5, making the tools you have live up to your vision and your values, and learn a little bit about how to assess where you are and where you want to be. And of course, the structure that you have can free you up, create options. It could have constraints involved in it. I think Healthy Communities Foundation had a lot of ability to be agile with this because they're a younger organization with a lot of trust among their team. It's a pretty small team. And they thought a lot about how it would feel on the passenger side as well, allowing the grantees to be a part of the process. Before we begin, if you're not familiar with Community IT, a little bit about us. We're a 100% employee-owned managed services provider providing outsourced IT support. We work exclusively with nonprofit organizations, and our mission is to help nonprofits accomplish their missions through the effective use of technology. We're big fans of what well-managed IT can do for your nonprofit and your mission. We serve nonprofits across the United States. We've been doing this for over 20 years. We are technology experts and are consistently given the MSP 501 recognition for being a top MSP, which is an honor we received again in 2023. I want to remind everyone that for these presentations, Community IT is vendor agnostic. So we only make recommendations to our clients and only based on their specific business needs. We never try to get a client into a product because we get an incentive or a benefit from that. We do consider ourselves best of breed IT providers. So it is our job to know the landscape, what tools are available, reputable, and widely used. And we make recommendations on that basis for our clients based on their business needs, priorities, and budget. So I am really excited today to talk more about Asana because I know a lot of nonprofits are using it. I'm sure some of you are here in this webinar to hear more about it. But I want to make sure to just clarify there's lots of project management tools out there. We're not recommending Asana over other ones or saying like it's the best. It really depends on what you have, what you need, what you're going to use it for, all of those questions. I'm very happy to hear from our expert. Gillian, would you like to introduce yourself and Healthy Communities Foundation?
Hi, everybody. My name is Gillian Knight. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm calling from the city of Chicago, which is also historically known as the Council of Three Fires. That was the Potawatomi, Odawa, and Ojibwe tribes. But we also have a very thriving Native population that's still contributing to the city to this day. So a little bit about me before we get started. I have a background in youth development work, in food access and housing. And so once a youth programmer, always a youth programmer. So I might try to make or crack some bad jokes. And since I can't see you, you'll have to just bear with me. So I'm really excited to talk to you today. I don't know if I would call myself an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm definitely a person that tries to use the tools I have to like work smarter, not harder. I was about to say harder, not smarter, which I think some of us often feel that. So Healthy Communities Foundation is a health conversion foundation that resources on the west and southwest side of the city of Chicago, all the way out into suburban Cook County. As a health conversion foundation, we fund a geographic region defined by the original service area of McNeil Hospital, whose sale in 1999 established our endowment. And so our mission is that we are a community-informed grant-making foundation that seeks to measurably improve the health and well-being of individuals, families, and communities in our service region by promoting health equity, quality, and access. And so on the slide, there's some figures about like the who and the what that live in our region. And then this is our grant making strategy. So we resource in 4 specific ways. We give general operations support. We give capacity building resources, and then strategic initiatives and responsive funding. It is the belief of the foundation that flexible funding and a trust-based approach is the best way to serve organizations, because we trust them to know how to use the resources. So all of these things, especially our responsive funding, we believe that as a foundation, this is not our money. It's a it is health conversion. It is a community asset, and we see ourselves as stewards of the asset. So even though we have like a grant cycle where people apply, it's very standard. We also believe that the door to the resource should always be open, which is why we have this responsive funding component. But today I'm going to be talking about our general operations support work. So that's kind of the how we fund, and this is the what we fund. So we have 4 different funding areas. The first is access to quality health services, because we know that so many people do not have physical access, linguistic access, transportation access to quality clinical care. And so we resource organizations that are being very innovative in that work. The next thing that we resource is organizations that are addressing the social determinants of health. We also know that so much of an individual's health is determined by things outside of a clinical care space. So where you live, where you work, where you play, where you grow, where you love and worship are all places that can impact your health. And so for organizations working in that space, we resource there. We also, especially coming out of the pandemic, but it's been true for a very long time, is that there are some political determinants of health. So how organizations, we resource organizations that organize communities to push and pass policy that impacts health. So that is like a really kind of community organizing, power building, base building. And then the last one is augment local health knowledge. So the public health field is really crowded with data, but it lives in institutions that are not in community areas. And so we also resource organizations and institutions to ensure that data is actually living in the communities that the data was collected from, instead of having it extracted out and lived in institutions. So it's really about connecting people's lived experience with the data that has been collected about them so that they can make meaning of it on their own and develop their own solutions. So that's just a little bit about HCF.
So we wanted to get a little information from you about how your organization approaches software selection. So the first option is we gather stakeholders and go from there very thoughtfully and strategically. Second selection is it's a free-for-all. Every department or staff can purchase tech tools for themselves. The third option is the IT department decides what everyone can use. And the fourth option is something else or not applicable. So I want to stress, like, there is no right answer to this question. There's no judgment. So please just fill out how your nonprofit is approaching this question. There are so many different nonprofits with so many different styles and internal culture and management, tech savviness, all of those things kind of fold into this question. So we just wanted to kind of get you thinking about how thoughtful you are already about choosing your technology tools that you're using for different business processes that you're trying to kind of organize. Gillian, could you read the results for us?
Sure. So the most popular was we gather stakeholders and go from there. Very thoughtfully and strategically. Congrats. There was a tie for third with it's a free for all. Every department or staff can purchase tech for themselves. And the IT department decides what everyone can use or other not applicable.
Well, that's great. That is great to hear. So I think you're in the right place if you're trying to find more information about how to organize this selection process and listen to this case study. And then if you're just looking to get like a few more tips on how you could be even more thoughtful about it, you've come to the right place too. We're going to go ahead and start with the case study from Gillian.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to share a little bit about kind of the problem and then the way that we use technology to kind of solve the problem that I'm going to outline. I was brought on to Healthy Communities Foundation to help the organization figure out how we were going to define learning and evaluation and impact. And so often with evaluation means you have to do some reporting. And so we kind of created a theory of change and an evaluation framework and indicators. And like we launched that in winter of 2021. So right here, you can see this kind of like data collection timeline. So we have information from the grant application, we have site visits. Organizations got their award in summer 2021. So I have a degree in public health. So if you think of our grants as like a dose, so the dose is the grant because we have like some pre-test. We give a grant out and then we have our report to kind of see what changed as a result of the resources. So one thing that I believe in is that like we should have and engage in choice. And also that in the past, my experience as a person who was a grant seeker, my program officer often would act like they've never met me before, never heard of our organization before. And it just starts blank slate every grant cycle. And that's just not how human beings work. And so the other thing is I had program officers that I did not want to hang out with, if I'm being totally honest. And I wanted to limit the amount of time I spent with them. So kind of like holding all of these things together, we've embedded choice in our grant making process in two different ways. So the other thing that I was going to share is that this is the first time that Healthy Communities Foundation had done reporting. And because it was our first time, we were allowed to experiment with something that had never been done before. I was sitting in a session where they two foundations were talking about how they had totally removed applications and reports and that the program officers do them all by check-in conversations. And then there was an argument that kind of broke out in the workshop because the belief that like all the reporting requirements and applications being done by the program officer could rob community of voice, could be misrepresented. And so then people were like saying that written word is better. And I just sat with the fact that there were no nonprofits in this conversation at all. It was philanthropy arguing with itself about what is best, but it wasn't really informed by any of the partners that they have to interact with. So I was like, well, why can't we do both? Like it was new. So these are the two places that we've been able to embed choice. For organizations that we have had a prior funding relationship with, they have the option to have like a long, because for like equity purposes, like if you want all 75 minutes with me and my bad jokes, you can do that. But if you're like, keep it pushing, like you can select a 45-minute Zoom call to just kind of update me on what's going on with your organization. So that's kind of choice one. And the other piece is when we set out on this reporting process, we used all the data collected from the application, site visit, grant award, grant term. There was also like parallel to this, our 2022 cycle open. So we took information from site visits, conversations, emails, newsletters, and pre-filled their written application. We notified everybody that their report has been partially filled and that they had the option to either just write their report and submit it, or they had the option to schedule a 30-minute phone call with myself or my colleague Danny on the learning team to talk through their answers. And so it was an experiment. We piloted it with two grantee partner organizations that were very different. One very small nonprofit, under $500,000 is budget size, and then we did a large health institution, and both gave us some really interesting feedback. The smaller organization said that they wanted, because I was like, I don't know how useful this is for you, but they actually shared like our report for their work. And the leader at the small org was like, actually, I would like a copy of my report, because so often in conversations with funders, I say something really important that I wish I had written down so I could put it in a different application. So they encouraged us, because I felt like it was too big brothery to record, and so that we could offer the transcript. And then it helped us on the back end, because then I didn't have to like type and listen and do all of that together. So our piloting process really helped us kind of flatten or like kind of decrease more, like make our process a lot more frictionless. So that's kind of how we got to this place of like, just how do our partners feel about either checking in with us verbally or written? It was about half and half. So about half of our partners did written, half did verbal. And the big thing that we learned is that writing a report wasn't the favorite, but verbal wasn't the favorite either. That the strongest finding we had was they liked the ability to choose. I'm going to talk about some of our like the values that we have as a foundation, what tool we used, and then like how it showed up in practice. So we believe that in order to build trust, you have to be in relationship. So like a relational approach sometimes requires having a conversation versus an email. And so we use a tool called Calendly, where people are able to schedule time to meet with us. So that was something that we were able to deploy when we were launching reporting. We use it for our site visits and check-ins. It is a time saver. The amount of emails back and forth to try to find a good date is always tough. And Calendly really eliminates a lot of that back and forth. And so then, and again, with this practice piece, organizations are able to choose what works best for them on their timeline, and it syncs with my calendar. And so it does all that kind of administrative work for me. The other thing is a trust-based practice called doing the homework. And so we took on finding answers to some of our reporting questions in site visit notes, applications, all of that stuff. And we were able to pre-fill their like kind of the different questions and sections with information they've already provided us. One, to kind of honor the work that they've already done. Two, to also signal the kinds of things that we were thinking about in response to those questions. Because for some people, if I ask you what is a square, someone might say a shape, but someone else might say a person that follows the rules. And so the piece of that is when we pre-fill, we're able to signal that if I'm asking you what is a square, here's some examples of shapes, you're able to respond in shapes. So that has been really helpful for us. And it also has led to better answers and data because of that signaling. And then in a conversation, we can say, again, what is a square? And they start saying a person that follows the rules. And I'll be like, actually, we were thinking more like shapes. And then we, again, back to better data. So that's that piece too, because we want to use what we have and put the burden on us, because we're the ones that are mandating reporting, not them. And so we should be the ones doing all the like heavy lifting, and then they can do the refining work. We also have like a value of being a learning foundation. We want to know and build the case for why general operations support, and specifically multi-year commitments of general operations support. Like we're looking to build the case for why more resources need to be done in this way, and adjust our practice and approach year over year. So our first year we learned that staffing or flexible funds were critical for staffing. And then this year, a really interesting finding from our multi-year partners is they're like, using unrestricted funds for like utilities, like keeping the lights on. And so there's something going on that we're going to start asking about. So we're able to like iterate with what we learn and point to what we heard and then point to the action that we were able to take. So for this completing the report piece, the grant management system we use is Wizehive. So that's that pre-filled place. We utilize Zoom and then Otter AI as our transcription service, as well as Calendly to kind of have multiple modalities to collect better data so that we can build relationships with organizations. Because nobody like has amnesia every time you talk. Like, I think it's really useful to be able to do that. And then another value is like organizing our process and progress internally. One thing that we've been working really hard at HCF is how do you communicate or quickly learn how everybody's projects are doing without bothering them all the time? Because like, how many times have we gotten the email or the like Teams message like, hey, what's the status on XYZ? So for us, I wanted to minimize that kind of like, I don't want to say tinkering, but it slows me down when I have to reorient you to like where start, middle, and end is. So we used Asana to manage this process of the reporting thing that we were doing so that my team members could see, oh, we haven't reached out to this organization. Oh, I'm planning on having a conversation with them. I see they haven't done their report. I'll remind them. So it allowed a level of visibility across the project that freed up my time and my like colleagues' time, in addition to like having all the critical documents related to the process linked to the Asana board as well. So, and we're about to get into some Asana specifics, but I want to be super clear. I believe Microsoft is working on a version of this. Monday is one. I believe there's all kinds. So Wizehive and Asana were softwares that were picked by people before me. So this is what I got when I came on. And since I had previously used it as a project and work management tool, I figured our organization had previously been using it more as like a library warehouse, like easy to search and find things, and then used it for like internal planning. But Asana generally is a flexible tool that can help map your workflow, and you can use it for time-sensitive one-off projects. Frankly, I had a big party at my house recently, and I used Asana to plan the party. Content calendar for social media, all kinds of events planning, meeting agendas. I use Asana for my one-on-ones with my supervisor. We use Asana to onboard new staff with things that they need to read or activities that they need to complete. And we also have begun using it as a CRM where we can kind of send emails with relationships to their kind of organizational profile. So we can see in real time the last time an organization has been engaged in some sort of way. So that is generally how we have used Asana over time. So this screenshot shows what our Asana project for reporting looked like at the beginning of the process. Before I get into our process on the next slide, I wanted to give some context about some Asana keywords that'll be helpful for understanding the process for the project. So super quickly, the project is that top box. Asana organized work into shared projects as boards or lists for your initiatives, meetings, and programs. HCF also refers to them as boards. The next item is tasks. What needs to be done to complete or support the projects? Tasks outline who is doing what and by what date. For our reporting project, each organization that needed to complete a report was added to the project as its own task. Subtasks are additional steps needed to complete a larger task. Subtasks are attached to the original task. And sections. The sections will group tasks based on what workflow stage each task is in. For the reporting project, our workflow stages or sections were pending, meaning we hadn't heard from them. Verbal reporting prep, meaning they had scheduled a meeting via Calendly, but it has not come up yet. verbal reporting meeting complete, meaning we had the meeting, but had not cleaned up our notes. And then completed verbal report is when we were able to fill it into Wizehive. And then completed written report is when an organization would just submit the written report and we'd get a notification from Wizehive and we'd move them into complete. So we knew who we had spoken to and where they kind of were in the pathway of the project. It can be really anything. So it could be tracking the stage of a workflow, pending, in progress, or completed. It can provide categorizations for the type of work you're doing. So let's say you have a new person joining your team and you want to create an onboarding Asana project to house the material the new hire should review or information that would be helpful to know. You might have sections like HR and payroll, listservs and mailing lists to subscribe to, different communications, and suggested trainings. You can also add custom fields to easily track information. These fields can be used for filtering the tasks in an Asana project. The custom fields we used for this board included report type, so used for tracking progress for each organization. Unknown, organization has yet to select a report type. Calendly scheduled, organization scheduled a verbal reporting meeting, verbal meeting complete, the scheduled meeting with the organization is complete. Completed verbal report, all tasks associated with the verbal report are complete, including the cleanup and submission in the grant portal, and written report complete. So the organization submitting that written report in the grants portal. We also used grantee type, annual or multi-year. We use this field for filtering or tracking completion of both of our reporting cohorts. We also utilized something called rules. So Asana allows you to put logic to automate manual process, such as updating fields, moving to a different section, assigning additional tasks or subtasks. And we use rules to keep our workflow moving and to automatically set next steps for us based on the information we add in Asana. So for example, one of the rules, once the verbal meeting was complete, it would move into, like, so we'd have a date on it, and when that date would pass, it would move into the verbal report complete. So we had set up, and then whenever we would have it complete, it would assign myself or the person that did the report additional steps. So checking off if we put it into Wizehive, if we've uploaded the transcript, and so that we would know, even so then I wouldn't have to bother Danny about where she was at, and she wouldn't have to bother me. So we really use those rules pretty comprehensively. So section 1 is pending. So when we create an Asana project, we added all the organizations that were required to submit a report to the pending section. We set up the report type to unknown and the grantee type, depending on which was applicable. The verbal reporting prep work that we would do is the tasks or organizations in this section scheduled a verbal report with us, but we have to prepare our notes for that meeting beforehand using rules. And then tasks of organizations that have scheduled their meeting will move to this section, and add subtext for the next steps will be created. So in a scenario, we're notified via Outlook that fake organization 1 scheduled a verbal report with me on December 1st. I open the reporting project in Asana and select the task for fake organization 1 and update the following fields. The assignee, so I assigned the organization to myself since they scheduled the meeting with me. Due date, I set the due date as the day of the scheduled meeting, and the report type as I changed it to Calendly scheduled. After updating the fields, our rule for this section triggers 2 changes. The task is moved to verbal reporting prep, so we know that something has been scheduled, and it created a subtask, prep verbal report template for meeting, assigned to the original assignee. With this rule, you can select a due date in 5 amount of days or however many when the task is triggered. So for this example, I set it for 3 days, and after the rule was triggered, that is when I updated the assignee, due date, and report type. The details of the subtask include the information and attachments needed to complete the subtask. Section 3, verbal report meeting complete. The organizations in this section completed their verbal report, and now we have to clean up our notes and submit the report in our grant database. Again, using our rules, tasks of organizations that have completed their report will move into this section, and the rule will create a second subtask for next steps. So the scenario kind of continues. I've completed a scheduled verbal report with fake organization number 2. I opened the reporting project in Asana and assigned or selected the task for fake organization 2 and updated the report type field to verbal meeting complete. After updating this field, our rule for this section will trigger 2 changes. The task moves to verbal report meeting complete, and it creates a subtask to clean up reporting notes assigned to the original assignee. And the due date for the subtask will be set for X amount of days. So for this example, we gave us 14 days later to be able to like clean up our work. We have section 4. So the tasks in this section have completed all steps required of the verbal report, including meeting, note cleanup, and submission on Wizehive. Rules associated with this stage will move the task into this section and mark the task as complete. So if with this scenario, I finished a verbal report with fake organization 3, as well as the subtasks associated with the main kind of parent task. The report has been submitted in our grant database, and I updated the report field type to verbal report complete. After updating the report type field, the rule will trigger 2 changes. The task will move to the completed verbal report section, and the task will be marked as complete. Section 5 is completed written report. So the organization's tasks in this section completed a written report on Wizehive, and no further action is required of that organization at this time. So the scenario is we also monitored Wizehive throughout the process to see if organizations, when they submitted their written report, upon seeing that fake organization 4 submitted a written report, we update the tasks report type field to written report complete. The rule moves the task to completed written report section and marks the task as complete. This is just one small way we use Asana to house all of the details and tasks associated with a project, and not to only keep us on track in our work, but to also make information easily accessible to our coworkers. We've talked about how we believe in transparency with grantee partners, but internal transparency with our colleagues is another value of the foundation. So we often ask ourselves how we can embed the practice of sharing information internally into our processes. So we're really doing it from the start rather than sharing back information at the end of a project. There's also a lot more you can do with rules and logic and other features that we didn't use on this specific project. With rules, there's really so much more than creating subtasks or moving to different sections. One we use a lot is a trigger that will add a comment and tag a relevant staff member in the comment. There's also a feature called dependency where you can make a task dependent on different tasks or subtasks. So for example, if you had 2 tasks, one was for sending an email to your board members and another was for reviewing the draft of that email, you could make the first task, the draft review, dependent on the second task, meaning that the person assigned to sending the email cannot send the email until the task of the person assigned to reviewing the draft completes that task. So you can like link work together and have Asana do that notification of like, hey, I reviewed this, and that it eliminates that and it just notifies you that it's ready to go. So what we learned from the process of doing this was, 1, we assessed how much foundation time it takes, because nothing happens in a vacuum. Each report that was verbal utilized from start to finish about 95 minutes of staff time per person. So we were able to split among 2 team members for additional perspectives and decreased staff time. And the new process allowed for us to adjust questions in real time and produce clearer insights. So back to that kind of what is a square question. The other thing that we learned about the partner experience is that we had kind of an exit survey. And what we learned from partners is that pre-filled reports signaled what we wanted to learn more about and saved partners time and effort. The pilot respondents liked the choice of the report format and asked to have it again. So they liked the fact that they were able to do a verbal report. And piloting with partners helped us refine and streamline further to a more co-created process. So this process we were able to refine and utilize. And this year we're going to be much faster on delivering what we learned in the report than we were this year. Or in 2024, we'll have better insight and more kind of publicly talk about what we learned, because it took us about 9 months to assess all of our data, and this time it's probably going to be about 4 months. And then the feedback on the process, partners received the report questions ahead of time for both format choices. We also kind of did a pop-up video style with the question and then kind of information about why we were asking each question. And so partners shared that the clarity on the why behind the questions and the new reporting process, they said it enhanced their opinion of the foundation. So we also asked, it's like, did this improve your view of HCF? Did it hinder you? And like everyone said that they really appreciated it. And one of their requests of us was kind of doing some of these presentations to other funders to share how we were kind of doing that homework, and like kind of streamlining our processes. So I've been able to present to a variety of different places and trying to get people on board with choice. So that is all I have.
Thank you so much. I feel like that was just such a I feel like I already learned a ton about your specifics of how Asana is working for you, but also how you went through and we're looking at the process and being so thoughtful about it. So we did have one question come in. I just shared the article that was shared in Q&A. It's an article from Washington Post about using AI in your meetings. So the question was, when you enable AI or Otter AI for meetings, how do you consider consent and how that might impact the organization culture when choosing to launch it, as well as privacy concerns for, either party, I would say.
Yeah, so consent is built in. So in Calendly, you have the option to add questions of like whatever. So for us, in the time that they chose to schedule, they were asked, like, we're hoping to record this to provide a transcription. This is like how we shared that like we're only using it for transcription services. We can delete it. So we asked them if they're okay with us recording. We're asking if they want a copy of it, because like maybe they want a copy of the video or the transcript themselves. So we asked if they wanted a copy of the transcript, video, and like everything, or if they wanted us to delete it after we were done. And then we like had a section where we outlined what our our kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Like our tech security. So it's like we're in SharePoint, it's like password protected. And we had one organization ask us to password protect their report. So we were able to kind of outline the different kind of consent yeses and nos in that scheduling process. So for organizations that said no, we didn't. But yeah, so that is how we kind of built in consent there. And like kind of again as an exchange for their time, like if they wanted a copy of the transcript, like we want to provide it to them. So that's how we figured that one out.
Yeah, that was a great question, especially because a lot of what you're talking about was that trust-based, like you're in a partnership with them. So I loved hearing that about the consent being, or the questions being right up when you're making the appointment in Calendly. That's a great way to handle it. I just put in the chat and I wanted to mention, we did a webinar last month on data cybersecurity, and this issue did come up several times about not just if you choose to use like a third-party AI tool to do a transcript. Some of the tools that you're using have AI within them that's being released, like, oh, here's the upgrade, and now you can use AI like in Zoom or in Teams to, to do a summary of your meeting or what have you. So, and somebody said, and I don't know, I thought it was a good way to put it. They're like, for a lot of people, as long as you say that there's AI involved, like they just want to know that it's been AI'd. And then you can, then they're like accept it and go on with it. And then I loved how your process actually did pull out the people who didn't want it recorded or wanted it password protected. And it helps all of us think too about like what, any tool, any platform can be used in an insecure way. Like you can upload your password to SharePoint, but that's on you, like you can share something in a meeting that then you're like, oh, that was actually private information. So it also makes you think about, like what you're sharing and in which context as well, like as a foundation, and then what the AI, may be sharing or keeping or making public. So that you need to do.
Yeah. Well, and this process, like I think I had shared in this prep call, is this process has allowed us to streamline a lot of other ones. So in practicing this pre-filling piece with the report, we're actually implementing pre-filled LOIs this year for organizations that are returning applicants, because organizations' core programs and services don't meaningfully change year over year. However, like we are keeping some blank because, for example, what racial equity goals or work they're doing should be changing year over year. So we're putting in like kind of the big pieces that don't move that often and are leaving some items blank to make sure and signal that we're expecting a different answer this year, guys. So there's some of our partners that are, using the same talking points that they were using in 2019 related to their racial equity work. So the goal is to kind of make the LOI process much easier for partners to just do those quick updates to get them into the swim lane to get funded. So we were able to do that. We also were able to utilize kind of this Asana board to kind of manage our site visit process. So who was meeting with which organization at what date. We also used some demographic data, zip codes, and we were able to say like, who's present in this zip code, and we can like hit with the Asana topics or like the categories. We could just hit a specific category and then count how many organizations were in a particular zip code or are working in domestic violence. And so like from a regional perspective, we could look at it, we could see from a leadership perspective and from like a subject matter perspective. So we had really good bird's eye view of our organizations and like how the whole kind of suite of recommendations came together.
That's excellent. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with me. We did have a couple of questions at registration, and so I just wanted to kind of surface one of them, which also is a question that I have, which is you talked about using the tools that you already had. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about kind of your thought process in that. Was that because you had, budget constraints or like cultural constraints, like we already use this platform, we're not going to get another one. How can we make it do what we want? How did you approach that?
Yeah, so I had the privilege of getting or being clear and using Asana as a project management tool in a previous role. So that is how I had seen it used. And so the organization had paid for Asana. I don't know how that came to be. And the same thing goes for the grants management process. And I guess I just tried to make it work because that's what I had. And I probably still have like the nonprofit, duct tape and a nickel and you're making it go. And so I was just like, we need things to be better. Like our internal communications needed to be better. Like we kind of had a culture of bugging people for things all the time. And so it's really hard. My role in the learning and evaluation space, it's a lot of data work and I need to like focus. But if I'm like answering easy questions every 15 minutes, it slows me down. So that was the piece that we're as a team really building like muscle in Asana because it has not been used this way before. And so I would say that like myself and one other person would be like, I don't want to say expert level Asana users, but are like use it a lot for things. And then we have our like speaking transparently, and I'm sure Maria would not care, like our foundation president like looks at Asana, gets nervous and like exits. So it's just like, and we're working on like getting that going a little bit differently, but we as a team internally, we're really across the spectrum when it comes to like how we use Asana. And so for the design, setup, test, and train, luckily it was just myself and my colleague Danny managing this project management platform. With the site visit temp or board that I shared about, there were 5 of us working in it, and we have some work to do, right, around that training piece. So with the design, setup, test, and train for the reporting process, it took like an hour. And I walked through it with my colleague Danny, and then we were good to go. And then I see this other question of how important do you think the particular platform, so Asana, is versus the strategy, intent, and process? And so I'll answer that question, and there's another one. I personally believe that it's similar, like when people talk around fear of AI, I really believe that your intention and your strategy and your process matter way more than your tools. I can share at the foundation that there have been some technologies that were adopted because we thought the tools were magical. And I am very famous in my office for saying, like, it is a tool, it is not a magical tool. You have to, and like, if you get it working and humming, again, for this, have the tools work for you as opposed to you working for the tools. Like when we embed rules, when there's kind of logic embedded in our process, it allows for that to happen. And so I think if we can identify, so like more complex projects, so like our site visit board around the how long did it take to test, train, and review, like it took about an hour to set up the board, and then I had to train every single person for 45 minutes, and then we realized that perhaps one training one time was not enough, and that we're going to, this year in our grant cycle, Danny and I will review how to fill and populate the site visit board so that it ultimately helps us with our process. So it helped us manage like how site visit season was going, but it also was able to populate a document that we provide to our board with our grant recommendations. So like we were able to kind of do amounts, who's their leader. So like all of those kinds of categories that I shared, we were able to like use that from like a planning strategy perspective, but also it created a document that we submitted to our board for their review. So it was both a process and a product that we were able to create. And then Microsoft is working on something similar. So if you have Microsoft Teams, or if you have updated to the new Outlook, there is a light bulb that has tasks that have been assigned to you. And so you can see that there's like this, it's probably coming, because those big Microsoft, Amazon, they don't like whenever there's little guys doing something that they feel they should be doing. And so there are a couple ways in your Outlook and via Teams that you can assign tasks and to yourself, to other people. I will share that when I've used them, like there's no like reminder or like pop-up, like you have to go searching for your tasks versus not. So it's not as useful as Asana yet.
Yes. Yeah. I had the opposite. Actually, I had somebody I knew, a colleague was fooling around with it and like, oh, how can I do this? And like set tasks for like several of us that were like, I've never heard of this task. And then you get like this little, reminder and you're like, wait, what? I didn't agree to that. So yeah, I think the Microsoft is not quite, and I'm sure it'll be Microsoft-y, that it'll have like 20 different ways to do the same thing. Whereas sometimes, like you said, the little guy, it's like, it's just, I mean, even Asana it's got all these complexities, which I feel like you took us through so well today. And I actually use Asana to do my stuff. And I'm like, oh, I've got a bunch of good new ideas on like how I can play around with it a little bit more. So thank you for that. But definitely, I loved another piece that you pulled out around. We had a question about efficiencies. And I have a colleague who always says, like, every time you solve a problem, if you ask the right questions, like every time you get efficiency, like you have like 5 more things you can do, because now you have like extra information, you have extra, like an extra piece of the puzzle, and you're like, that makes you ask more questions. So I loved the way you talked about this workflow helping you pull the data together at the end so that you have a better or maybe more efficient, like all of those things were things that you could know before, but you'd have to go out and get them. Whereas in this workflow, it seems like they're kind of assembled for you, and then you have to massage it a little bit, and then you've got your report and more information. But I'm sure that that's like, well, now what are we going to do with that, for the next piece that we're going to do. So I love that aspect of this, because when you do use AI or use a workflow process like you're doing, to solve one problem, it helps you, see more of the picture and more of the things that you could do. So I love that. I think I'm sorry, did you want to jump in?
Oh, I was going to just share, like, with our site visit board that we developed this year, previous years, I think when we would get down to kind of like deliberations on grant amounts, or like who we're saying yes to, who we're saying no to, my first grant cycle, it was 2 5-hour meetings and then like a final 4-hour meeting. This year we like cleared it in 2. Like my supervisor was like, what are we gonna do with the rest of the day? I'm like, I don't know. So it really, yeah, so it really does, when you're able to kind of really have, like, create less friction in your processes, you really find that you have more time.
Yeah. And you have so much more collaboration with your grantees through this process that's gotta be leading to more projects as well. I love that. If you're watching on YouTube today, we encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you'll get the updates every time we post a new webinar. And we invite you to register for an upcoming webinar on our website, because then even if you can't attend, you can be on the mailing list, you can register and ask your questions, and you can always, watch it later. We try to get to all of the questions that we can. You can always also suggest topics that you'd like to hear about in upcoming webinars. And I just want to make sure to thank you again, Gillian, for sharing so frankly, what your process was and what Healthy Community Foundations is trying to do and kind of where you are on that journey. Thanks for sharing these specifics around Asana and around the tools that you chose and kind of how you did that, thinking through your processes. So really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for joining us.